going on.
Oh yeah. I'm kind of the same way. I basically never used Discord. Um, about a year ago, all my friends started using it, so now I gotta like figure this crap out. And then they started doing all
Yep.
these judge conferences on Discord, and then it's just like, well, okay, I guess now I gotta now we really have to do it. So.
Yeah.
So yeah, first of all, I wanted to thank you for taking the time out of your day to talk with me. Um, I really appreciate it.
Not a
And
problem.
I also wanted to ask if you were okay with me recording this just for like notes purposes, and then
Yeah. No, that's totally fine.
yeah, I also had some indications from some of the people that follow my channel that it might be kind of interesting to hear this. So if it's okay with you, I'd like permission to upload some of this,
Yeah.
some or all of this interview
Nope.
to
I don't
the.
have any problem with that either.
All right, awesome. So that's great. I'll obviously wanted to make sure I checked before I went ahead and did something
Hmm.
like that. But yeah, so let's get started. I did have a few questions that I wanted to make sure that I touched on. But before I get to any of that, maybe if you had any kind of really interesting, like what's the first thing without any prompting that stands out to you? Well, I guess maybe before that even. Um, maybe a little bit of introduction. So maybe if you could talk a little bit about what your background with Magic is, and especially
Sure.
regarding the earliest days of Magic.
Sure. Basically, between my junior and senior years of high school, a friend of mine and I collected comics pretty heavily, and we went to the comic book store, and there was a card game that had come out. Magic was out. Had come to our local comic book store in St. Cloud, Minnesota, um, and he was like, you have to try this game. You have to try this game. It's so amazing. You have to try this." And he only had two starter decks left in the store at that time. They happened to be beta. Um, and my friend and I picked them up, and we were hooked playing the same five card decks or five color decks against each other for um, a long time, because it took a while for Unlimited and Arabian Nights to hit St. Cloud as well, and we got it in very limited supply. So I remember one of my two rares was a personal incarnation, and the only way I had to cast it was I had a Celestial Prism, and that was my third white source. I only gotten two planes in the whole deck. I just remember how we were so far from tournament magic.
Oh my gosh,
Um,
yeah. I suppose a lot of the stuff that doesn't make a lot of sense in the present day about some of the stuff they had in early Magic makes a lot more sense if you look at it in the context of the early.
yes, yeah, no, your cards that you see in the Alpha Beta Unlimited, even Arabian Nights and Antiquities, that would be draft chaff now, were bombs back then. Like, the best card in my deck was Crowworm.
Yeah, yeah, I remember. I've talked to some other people who were playing back in the oldie days too, and that's for sure a thing. Like a 6 mana 6/4 with no drawbacks. That's like, ooh,
Yeah,
that's big game.
no, and when you see all the memes coming out over the colossal great worm being a 6/6 that was in every set for six with trample, Crowworm is horrible.
Yeah.
And
But hey, I mean, it dodges lightning bolt, so it's not going to get removed
yeah,
by a 1 mana spell unless it's swords to plowshares. But
well,
uh,
yeah, and even then we were playing disintegrate and fireball over
oh
lightning bolt
yeah, oh yeah,
because it was a finisher.
yeah, yeah.
So
So it's a
um,
simpler time back then for sure.
yeah,
So that's really
yep.
awesome. So you've been playing Magic since beta. Um, would you say you've been playing continuously or like following the game continuously, or did you
I
take a break sometime?
I took a break in the middle. Actually, um, I had played pretty heavily tournament for a long time, since as soon as the tournament scene started, and ended up getting offered a position in game design with Decipher, when they were switching from producing the Star Wars card game to the Lord of the Rings card game.
Oh, okay.
So I ended up working in the gaming industry for a while, um, and I didn't have time to keep playing Magic. I probably played a few like F&M drafts during that time, but yeah, I took a while off, and then I came back in around Innistrad. I think I left around Scourge and came back in around Innistrad.
Okay.
So I had a break in there for a while I was working with other companies,
All right. Yeah.
and I was um, during that time I got to do like crazy things. Like I was the head judge of the Lord of the Rings pre-release, the
Oh, no
first one
kidding.
when nobody had ever played the game at Gen Con. So I got to run a high level tournament where nobody knew what was going on.
Ah, I think I actually remember. I think I actually remember hearing about that.
Yeah,
which Gen Con was that? Was that how many years
it was.
ago?
I believe it was the last. It may have been the last year. It was in Milwaukee, even.
Ah, yeah,
I don't remember what exact year it was,
yeah.
but
Because I have a friend who plays the Lord of the Rings card game, and he
sure,
was telling me about that. So that's very cool. Small world, I guess.
yeah. So yeah, that was actually probably my first real judging experience was working for Decipher, and then when I came back into playing, eventually the PPTQ system came along,
Right.
and I won the first PPTQ I played. So I was like, well, what am I going to do now? And the judge at the tournament was like, oh, you can learn how to judge. So
Oh,
I that's what I did for the rest of the PPTQ season was learn how to judge. I went around with all my friends who I was planning on going to all these tournaments with anyway, and helped the judges, the level twos out at them, and then tested from there.
very cool. Very cool. Uh, it sounds like you had a lot of tournament experience even before the PPTQ season.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about how you got into Magic tournaments, like what the first ones was like. Because like I mean, for me, when I think about Magic tournaments, I think like okay, we go on scg.com and see when the next SCG is. Go on Reddit, look in the Reddit, the sub to see what's coming
Right.
up. Obviously, that wasn't around back then. So how did you like hear about Magic tournaments to even get started in it?
Basically, at the same comic book store I had got started at, there were a group of kids, mostly high school age then, that would hang out and play, and we would trade and whatnot. And they said, "Oh, there's this toy shop in town that's going to start running tournaments." And I was like, "Oh, what? What's how do you do tournament magic?" And they're like, "Well, you can't play any of the anti cards." This was right after Shahrazad was printed, of course, and that was banned. That was
Oh
the
no.
only non-anti card that was banned, and you had to have at least 60 cards and no more than 4 of each card in your deck.
Okay. So we at this point we had already got the 60 card limit and already got the 4 of rule, and we already
Um,
started to get some banning and restricting stuff going on.
yeah, yeah, it wasn't. The DCI we was a rumor we had heard of that someone read about online, um, and I don't know what form it was in at the time, but they did come up with the guideline of 64 to start.
Yeah, because that wasn't part of the original game. You had I remember hearing rumors of the 20 Black Lotus, 40 Ancestral Recall
Oh yeah,
deck
we.
or
I mean, when tournament magic started, back then, first of all, when people opened their packs during unlimited, um, they didn't think like new players, casual players at the time didn't understand why a dual land or a mox was a good card.
yeah. Well, I mean like
They
that that makes
they
sense.
played
It's
monocolor decks,
yeah,
and
yeah.
so um, I think the first real tournament deck I ever ran had 4 Savannahs in it, and that was all for land. And then it was just um, 4 of each mox, 4 Lotus. I probably had 4 Dark Ritual in there,
Oh jeez.
and then Armageddon and Sarah Angels. You know, just random green and white creatures that were a decent body at that time, and um, we were out. People were like, they called it a no rare deck, but you were literally playing
Yeah, all the
4 of
lands are
each of the
rare.
power. So yeah,
Every mana producing thing basically is a rare. So
yeah,
that is
yeah.
another question that I kind of had in my in the back of my head here is like, what did you do to know what kind of deck you were supposed to be playing? I mean, this was before you could just go online and be like, oh, here's what the top MTG top
Right.
8 or Goldfish or whatever. Here's what.
Um,
So how did you know? Did you make everything up yourself, or did you brew
you
it
kind
up?
of figured out. Like I realized really fast that if you used artifact mana in Armageddon, you were going to beat anyone using real land, and it didn't take long to figure out things like that. I was one like I remember people thought Swords of Plowshares was such a bad card because you gave your opponent life. So the tournament players were the ones that started going, wait a second, things like tempo and card advantage are more important than card quality a lot of the time. Um, and that really once you got the concepts that are still very important in the game today down with the limited cards there were, you really had a limit on what was playable. Um,
Well,
and
that's for sure.
even after restrictions happened, you still were going to play blue for Time Walk, Time Twister, and Ancestral. So that already put you in one color, and you just kind of work things from there.
Right.
If you look back at like the old school Magic tournaments, um, I'd imagine it's a lot of that. Even Vintage today still is blue, Vintage, and even Legacy.
Yeah. And like, a lot of the time, even if you're not even actually playing those colors, you at least, the
Right.
splash
If
forward.
you
You got some fetch lands, you got some dual lands,
yeah,
get
you got
some
fetch lands and you got brainstorms.
yeah.
You're playing blue, and it's concepts that even I going back when Brainstorm was initially printed, we just did not see it as a good card.
Yeah, I
Um,
actually remember that because I talked with the artist for the original Brainstorm when I was at Gen Con one year. He went to Gen Con, and that was one of the things that he talked about. He remembers that at some point in the history of that card, he started getting a lot more requests for people to
right,
sign it because that was when like they people figured out that, hey, this is actually pretty gosh darn
right.
powerful. So
It turns out when you're playing 12 lands in your deck that you're shuffling your deck every turn for the first 5-6 turns of the game.
yeah, and
So
this isn't the
putting 2
fetch lands
cards
you're
back
thinking
is
about, right? Like this is like the fetch lands that come into play tapped or something.
anything that shuffles your deck.
Yeah, because the actual fetch lands that normal Magic players think about when they think of
Yeah.
fetch lands, those weren't printed until much
No, I'm
later.
thinking like first the Mirage block ones.
Yeah,
Like I think Rocky Tar Pit is the black red. But
yeah,
yeah, they were. We didn't have a shuffle your deck effect yet
yeah.
to make Brainstorm. You're still not getting more than one card advantage, but your card selection is so much better because you're not forced to redraw those 2 bad cards.
Yeah, and that goes back to like what we were talking about earlier. Is like if you look at the context where these cards came up in, it starts to see a lot less
Oh yeah,
a lot less broken.
yeah. I know. I played in the first. I believe it was the first Worlds in 1993 or 94. I know Zach Dolan won. It was single elimination, and he knocked me out fairly early.
Oh,
But he was the eventual world champion, and he played a deck centered around bouncing stasis with Time Elemental,
oh yeah, I heard about that.
where I was playing Land Destruction, I think.
Yeah, and so was that like a new innovation at the time? Is it the first time that people had seen that strategy, or was it the first
Well,
time?
it was fairly early in that because Legends was the new set
Right. Yeah.
at the time, and so Time Elemental had just come out, and Legends wasn't easy to get a hold of, and it wasn't like you had Star City and everything. When a set comes out, you can order your 4 ofs now. We didn't have that back then. There was no eBay even. We had like bulletin board systems and stuff like that we were going through for trading, and a lot of it, I was in college at the time, so it was trading from we could communicate with other colleges easier.
Yeah.
So it was so everything was so different in that way too. Like when you asked earlier about how did you know what decks to play, well, you didn't have the internet where some streamer got the spoilers a month ahead of time and already has, worked out all kinds of synergy with the card. You didn't have any of that when a set came out. I remember, like, my friends and I at college sitting down when the Dark came out and opening packs, and someone typing into a computer the text of every card to try to get together the full list.
Oh man, because they didn't have that yet. Like this is
Cards
before
didn't
Wizards.
have rarities and numbers on them.
Yeah.
And it was all a total guess.
And like Wizards didn't like publish the list of all the cards that was in a set.
Nope.
At the beginning, you had to just know.
They started that with, I believe, Fallen Empires had that in one of like the Inquest or something like that.
Oh yeah.
That was the first time, and that wasn't even beforehand. That was as the set came out. You could see what the whole set looked like.
Yeah.
It was either Fallen Empires or it might have even been Homelands.
And that was like a big thing too, like knowing that there were this many cards, or knowing that there were this many blue cards.
Oh, Scry was the biggest game changer in the way that tournament players functioned, because before that, they were judging value of cards off of actual supply and demand, what people would want to trade,
Yeah.
Scry gave you prices. So they couldn't go in and, rip off little kids anymore or anything, because someone would pull out their Scry like they do now, where someone walks out and immediately there's a phone pulled out. Even if someone's not in the trade, they're checking trades.
Yeah, I'm not as old school as you, but I do remember when smartphones became a thing. And before smartphones were a thing.
That was during my break.
Yeah. So that changed the scape of things immensely. Like it used to be that every person at a game store would have a trade binder, and like every time there was not Magic being played, you could be like going around and looking at people's trade stuff. And now it's like, I see that a lot less in my area of the world. I don't know if things are the same over where you're at, but hardly anybody brings a trade binder to F&M anymore, and it's because trading is just so hard.
I see people bring it to their commander nights.
Yeah, you do see some of that because it's more like within friends.
Yeah, a lot of them are like they're switching from one color combination to another, so they've all of a sudden got a lot of the good ones from the deck that they broke up, and they're basically trading decks with each other at that point. Just to play new things, which is cool. I mean, it's something that I did on Magic Online. I actually did quite a bit of competitive play for Magic Online during World Wake. As well, and that was while I was working for Decipher. But I grew up in the tournament scene in Minnesota with Jerry Thompson.
Yeah.
He was like a young kid when I had been playing for a while already. So Jerry would come up with a deck list and give me the deck list, and then say, "Here, we need 2 of these decks built for the PPTQ tomorrow, or for the PTQ tomorrow." And he'd give me the deck list, and I would scramble around and get the cards to build the decks, and a lot of it was borrowing from friends. But so that was. We had a lot of really good players go through the like my play group that I was in. I was fortunate to play with a lot of good players. So while I never made the Pro Tour, I was going to like PTQs and having friends win and things like that. So
that's amazing. That's an amazing feeling when you get to play Magic with your friends and see them do well.
Yeah. I never was able to play Magic at the pro level, but I was considered to be good enough to play test with a lot of guys who've had success on the Pro Tour. So that was always really cool to me. And the Minnesota group was close with the Madison group, so at times it was playtesting with your Sam Blacks and Adrian Sullivan and
back when he was a big time Magic player.
Yep. Yeah. So it was always interesting. Like that's where Ken Burrell was in those playtesting groups.
Yeah.
If you know Ken.
Yeah, I know Ken. I've judged with him.
Yeah, he and I go way back to the early tournament days as well. So
very cool.
Like the beginning, I met him at my very first Pro Tour qualifier that I played in.
Oh wow! Yeah, now this is a Pro Tour qualifier, not a PPTQ, just a PTQ.
Yep. This was a bunch of people cramming into a convention center or a community. Actually, we're in a community center somewhere in the
Yep.
northern suburbs of the cities.
Yep. The good old
And
days.
yeah,
Yeah, I
yep.
consider myself very lucky. I actually judged one of the very last PTQs in our area, and
Okay.
it was right before they did away with those and went to the PPTQs,
Hmm.
and so it was a really amazing feeling, and that's the kind of tournament magic that I would love to see become like maybe we don't have the exact same system, but I would love to see
Right.
something similar to that come back and because
You
the
know,
you actually have like a small enough tournament that you could actually like see or get to talk to most of the people in the room, which I think we really
mhm.
miss.
Even the PPTQ system to me, I liked a lot because I was one of those guys that went every week until I qualified. And so there's guys from all over Minnesota, Fargo, wherever, who did the same thing. And it was like we would be like, oh, which one are you going to next weekend? And then we'd pull out all the schedules and try to divide all of our top players up as much as possible to give people from another store success, because you didn't want them at the same store
Oh
as you
yeah.
anyway, because if we divide up the good players well enough, it will help the good players. And I
Well,
think
that maybe
that,
two people could win out of your group.
right, yep, that really benefited the players a lot. But I think it ended up hurting the local game stores, because their locals were having a decreased chance at winning their own tournaments because people were traveling every week, and they had didn't understand what a PPTQ was when they were signing up for it. So
Yeah.
you saw a huge decrease in them after the first round.
I had I had like a large number of stores approach me and say, "Hey, I wanted I want you to judge our PPTQ. We're having a PPTQ. Oh, by the way, what is a PPTQ? Like,
Hmm.
that some variant of that conversation took place a lot of times back when those
Yeah,
were going on. So I definitely see where you're coming from.
yeah. I since I hadn't thought about becoming a judge until that first wave of PPTQs, I was very instrumental in going around to local stores in northern Minnesota and explaining to them the system and trying to get them to sign up for them, um, because I wanted the non-metro players to have a shot. Um, and I ended up winning like tournaments in Grand Rapids, Minnesota. These small northern towns that just happen to have a game store, because the fields were not as difficult.
Yeah, yeah, and,
Um,
and that's like a big thing is like the game selection. Now, was that a big thing back in the early days? Was there like when you went to a Magic tournament, would you go like, oh wow, X player is here from like
you would.
3 hours away or 6 hours away or
um,
whatever?
the first time I remember that was Saints Con. St. Cloud State had their gaming convention every year,
Mm.
and there was a group of us that we had figured out already then that we were more competitive. It wasn't even that we were better. We wanted to play tournament Magic, not kitchen table Magic.
Right.
Um, so we kind of started. There was no F&M program or anything. That actually came much later.
Yeah,
Like the
yeah.
first organized Magic that I remember was the Arena League, and that started during Ice Age. That's where I got my DCI number. That's when they started DCI numbers, which I miss.
Yeah. I my DCI plastic card. Do you still have like the plastic cards that they sent out like from the Magic Player Awards?
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. I have like one of those that my wallet destroyed because I actually carried it around with me in my wallet. And then I have like a couple of replacement ones that I never used because I was like, okay, these are kind of cool. I don't want to destroy all of them.
Yeah. No, I've got mine put away with just certain, like, I when I was playing Lord of the Rings, um, there I played on the pro level, um, and I've got like my trophy from top 8 at Worlds and stuff, and I've got my DCI card right next to that, because that
Uh,
was, to me, it's basically kind of the same.
yeah, yeah. So, how far do you think would be like a normal distance to travel back in the first Magic tournaments? Was it mostly people from whatever town it was,
Well,
or was
I,
there a lot
I
of
was
out of
living in St.
towners?
Cloud, so we would drive the like we would drive to Fargo, North Dakota, which was about 150 miles. We would go to Minneapolis, St. Paul area all the time.
Uh-huh.
And then when I went down to Worlds, all you had to do to sign up was sign up to be in the tournament. It wasn't like any, and that was in St. Louis, Missouri, I believe.
Ah, yeah.
Or it might have been at Gen Con.
You know, I
I
think
don't
it
know.
was at Gen Con one year. I
I
don't
think it was at
remember.
Gen Con and Nationals was in St. Louis, but I
That
know
that could be.
I had gone to both of them that first year because they were within driving distance for a carload of college students.
Sure. Yeah.
So, and then we would go to Winnipeg for tournaments all the time, from Fargo when I lived up there. And that was in 94, 95 about. So that was another, couple hour drive. Basically, we treated it like a professional sports event. How far would you drive to go to a baseball game? That was kind of how our minds would determine if something was too far or too cool, if it was within our driving range. And then you had your occasional big events that we would go to. Like, I don't think we ever missed Gen Con.
Uh-huh.
Because that was before I moved to Indianapolis. So driving to Milwaukee wasn't as bad. And the same guys went when I went to Indianapolis, but now they're all adults that have real jobs, so it's not a big deal.
Yeah. And like, how many people would be at these tournaments? Would it be
like rarely over 100. You probably were looking at like 35 to 90 for the big events, and then like some stores had weekly events that were basically like an F&M.
Mm-hmm.
You'd have anywhere between 8 to 30 or 40. But nobody ever played sealed anything unless it was a pre-release or a release at the store when it first came out. Like the first drafting that I had ever done back then, you did the Rochester draft, Winchester draft, those style of table drafts over pack drafts, because you could do it with a stack from someone's collection and basically do like a cube.
Yeah, yeah.
So someone had the International Collector's Edition, and we cube drafted the International Collector's Edition all the time.
That's so cool. Oh my gosh. So when did normal drafting, like what we would think of as a draft today, do you know when that started up?
I think that probably started not long after the Arena Leagues. So it was it wasn't until after Homelands and Fallen Empires. So that would have been.
So that was actually fairly early on.
Yeah, but the reason why they switched away from those size packs, oh no, it was after because Alliances was a small pack too.
Yeah.
They switched to the 15 card packs just because drafting was better out of a 15 card pack. You needed 3 packs to make a deck, and when you were doing the 8 card packs, it was.
Oh
really
yeah, you
awkward.
couldn't make a whole deck out of. You wouldn't have enough cards.
Yeah, I think you would have to draft 6 packs.
And while we're on the subject, I did want to talk about like the size of these tournaments. This is a question that someone else brought to me, and I had never really thought about it before. Like a lot of this is taking place before the DCI software that we
Right.
use to report the results or run the tournaments. So how did people keep track of who was going to have to play who, or who was the highest scoring, the highest record?
It was pretty much all bracket, single elimination brackets, and then if there were an odd number, they would go by the finishes from the previous weeks. Like if you had won one of their tournaments on a week, you're pretty much guaranteed to get a bye. And there were only maybe a half dozen people that were capable of winning them just based on what cards they owned at that point. I mean, their skill is a thing, but it just got really wiped out by card selection early on.
Yeah. Now was it the case that you could like buy the sealed product okay, but you just couldn't get the singles, or was it just like if you got Magic cards?
Yeah, there weren't many stores that had singles, and they were really unsure on how to price things then. I know I was buying when I graduated high school, I went to school and to college in Fargo, and I was buying dual lands in St. Cloud for the price of a booster. Um, and I literally left my credit card number there, and every time someone traded in a dual land for a booster, I was the one buying the new booster for them and getting the dual land. Um, and that was while Revised was out, because they were obviously like, if you wanted to try to play a new deck, you need to get the mana base first.
Right.
So they were the
And they're
easiest thing to
rares.
trade.
They're rares,
Right.
so there's just
Yep.
like not that many of them. So yeah, it would be tough. So you eventually got like 4 of each of them doing that sort of
Yeah,
thing.
I would just keep getting extras
Oh,
after I had my
okay.
4, because they were my trade currency. They were the best trade currency because I was getting way more than a pack in value for them.
Sure.
Um,
So how many you got now? You still have them all?
embarrassingly, I sold my whole collection when I went to work for Decipher, and I got
Ooh.
high scry value for the whole entire collection.
Well, that's pretty
It was
good at the
pretty
time.
awesome. But
Yeah.
now when I look back, and the guy still has my whole collection, and he quit playing Magic not long after that. But I had literally sold him 10 of each Revised dual land in perfect condition, and he wrote me out a check for $15 for each of them.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what they were worth then.
Yeah, that reminds me when I was in college. You remember when they had the Zendikar expeditions that
Yep.
they had in the booster packs? So I had a friend of mine who opened up Underground Sea in the original Zendikar because that was a thing you could do, and he traded it 1 for 1 for a Baneslayer Angel because they were both worth about $50 at the time, and well, didn't work out
Yeah.
so well.
Yeah, I
So
did. I did manage to trade back into a set of them before they skyrocketed when I got back into playing, just because I wanted a set for EDH. But
yeah, yeah, it's crazy how much the price of cards is. So what about back then? What was like what was expensive? What was an expensive card back then?
well, when they restricted the Power 9 or Power 10 at that time, because KSR was still legal, um, you were able to sell off your duplicates for like a Lotus was going for like 40, Moxes were going for between 10 and 15. And most of the blue power cards were going for about $20. And that was a lot of money back then.
Yeah, yeah,
But there weren't many people playing at all.
yeah.
So,
So the
you know,
liquidity's not great, huh?
I just remember opening people's binders and there being 3 Time Walks, 3 Ancestrals, because they couldn't only play with their 1 anymore. And I also thought it was hilarious because there were certain people who preferred white bordered cards over black bordered cards because they thought they looked crisper.
Yeah, yeah,
So I remember trading unlimited stuff for beta stuff because, like, I played a lot of black decks. So to me, having the black border in a black deck was really cool, and there was no value difference between
yeah,
them.
yeah. It wasn't back.
Right?
It's not like now
Alpha
where
was
people
worth
are like telling you that they're worth more.
Alpha was worth less because you had to play
Yeah,
in
you need the sleeves.
if you had Alpha cards, and nobody used sleeves.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and the sleeves are a lot worse back then too.
Oh yeah, they were. Yeah, I think that was part of the problem too. Is they broke so often that people didn't.
Yeah, you could barely go through a tournament without like breaking up, and
Mhm.
that problem continued for years and years. It's only probably I would say in the last like between 5 and 10 years that they've really come up with a
Yes.
formulation that's like actually like you could play multiple tournaments and not have them degrade
Well,
significantly.
it took for Dragon Shield to be a competitor to Ultra Pro for them to both have to step their games up.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I remember
before
the
that,
old Ultra Pros were just like, oh my gosh.
but that was all you could get.
Yeah, yeah. That's what you had. And the thing about the not having any sleeves, like that's why you always want to look at the backside of the old cards that you're trading
Oh
for
yeah,
or buying.
I've got a lot of Goblin cards from my Goblin deck from the dark, like Goblin Caves and Goblin Shrines that I had
Oh,
originally back in the day, and you can tell that they were in my Goblin deck then because they have marks of red paint on the back from playing on a picnic table.
oh my gosh.
And we took our decks camping. Sat and
Yep,
played on a
yep.
picnic table. what we did.
Yeah, that's a thing. That's a thing. I did it too. I played outside. I remember playing when I was in Boy Scouts. I played outside with some of my friends who were camping out with me, and yeah, that was for sure a thing. And there's no play mats. There's no sleeves. It's just
Yeah.
that's that's what it was. So
Yep.
okay, that's some like major league nostalgia points, I guess, for me too. So
Yeah.
um, what about the rules changes? So you've been around since the very beginning, so you saw like all the major ones.
hmm
Without any prompting from me, what would you say is like the one that sticks out in your head is like the most impactful or the most significant?
When they introduced planeswalkers,
Really?
just flat out introduced planeswalkers, it was a card type that wasn't a creature, but still you had damage to interact with it, and there weren't, we didn't have any target planeswalker cards then, or
Yeah.
things like that. So they were so hard to interact with outside of combat. And when they came out, it wasn't long before we got Jace the Mind Sculptor, and he just totally warped Magic at that time. And it was because there just never was a good way to deal with a planeswalker other outside of combat, and it made a lot of it just changed a lot of players. A lot of players wouldn't know what to do anymore once a planeswalker was on board because they were used to attacking their opponent all the time, but now they had to figure out the value of attacking the planeswalker versus the opponent, or it was just, it changed so much in the thought process of the game. And then the fact that it was a sorcery only thing took a long time for casual players to understand. Um, there was just so many different things about it that weren't listed in reminder text.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where if you have an enchantment that has use only as a sorcery, well, it says it on there. Um, so it was just a different thing for players to wrap their heads around, and even like for a long time, the pros were all like, "Can't we just get rid of planeswalkers? They're not good for the game." And
Yeah. That's Magic
but
players.
they ended up, Wizards of the Coast wanted these characters to be continuous in the story and drive their story, and that's why design teams just got stuck trying to make planeswalkers. And even throughout time, there are planeswalkers that really warp formats. I mean, the recent Teferis and stuff like that changed a lot. So, as a guy who started from the beginning, that was the something that blew me away. Like losing mana burn. Yeah, I mean, it took a few little things out of the game out, but it didn't change the way the game was played at all.
Hmm.
Um, to me, damage on the stack, losing that was a bigger thing than losing mana burn by far, because
Yeah, that was
you
a
know
big one.
Mog Fanatic was amazing when you could block
Yeah.
him, put his damage on the stack, and shoot because he was doing 2 damage.
Yep.
And there were a lot of creatures like that where
Sakura
they had
Tribe
sacrifice
Elder.
abilities. Yep. Yeah. So that was a big one too, but it wasn't a huge. It wasn't anything new. Combat was still going to be combat. Um, where Planeswalkers then kind of changed that, and they have made it easier with getting rid of the Planeswalker redirection rules.
Yeah, yeah, that
Where you used to
streamlined
bolt
things
your
a
opponent
lot.
and redirect it to your Planeswalker. Yeah, and that just made sense. It was just a matter of having to errata cards like Lightning Bolt that had said target creature or player for years because that was all you could target.
Yeah, yeah, there just wasn't planeswalkers.
And sometimes I think design teams are slow to do things like that. They're like, well, what is it? How are we going to change things for damage reduction in other formats? And it just, I think they were just better off doing what they did and errating everything. Um,
Yeah, I had my own personal like idea for how they could fix it, and I'm sure that lots of people at Wizards had like lots of different ideas, and I'm sure were desperately hoping that someone could come up with something that would be better than just okay, well we have to errata like 1,000 cards now,
Right.
so
Yeah. It,
everybody take a stack and then we'll see you next week.
in the current um, competitive world, they could nearly errata cards at a higher rate and cut down on the bannings because competitive players know that the cards have been changed.
Yeah,
But then you get your casual people that show up for a tournament and they have to tell them that none of their cards do what they say they do.
yeah,
Um,
and that's really jarring. And I imagine that
well,
was a lot bigger problem back, like in the early days of Magic than it is now. Because like now it's like you get a ban announcement or you get a errata. It's on Reddit. It's on the Wizards website. Everybody, talking about it. Everybody who's like part of any Magic community is hearing about it.
yeah.
Um,
Well, once there was, I'm trying to even think what websites we used back then.
yeah, yeah. I remember Pojo. That was a big one.
Yeah.
There was gosh, uh, there were several Magic forums that I was a member of. There was one called MTG News and there was one called MTG
Yep.
Salvation, and they had like a big drama war between them at one point.
Yeah.
Uh,
Salvation's still around.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it is.
The dojo
The
was the big one I
dojo.
remember going to. And that was basically, and there were a lot of babies on that team. We had baby Jerry Thompson and baby Brad Nelson, high school kids at the time who are now Hall of Famers,
Yeah,
um, that had nothing better to do than just spit out deck after deck after deck after deck and play test with their friends. And
yeah,
that's where a lot of those young players back then were the ones driving the pros. Like Finkel didn't make up all of Finkel's decks. Finkel played for Team CMU, and they they were really good players that sat and built decks and just beat them against each other all day long. And that's still how decks essentially are made, but now it's on Arena or Magic Online or something like that. You don't have people sitting in a room testing decks anymore. And I think that's kind of when we have the decline of the Pro Tour. And I think that kind of, once it stopped becoming about the gathering and more about the Magic, I just think it kind of killed the pro scene. Like,
interesting.
people used to like watching these pros sit at a table with each other, and once it became, sure, Arena's got a better platform to look at it, but it took the people away from Magic and turned it into a computer game. And there's so many computer games out there that were built to be computer games that Magic can't compete with.
Yeah, and I've always said the exact same thing. Like there's one thing that Magic has that makes it a better game than like Legends of Runeterra or Hearthstone or Eternal or like any of the like clones of Magic that started out
Mm-hmm.
as a digital game, and that's the fact that when you're playing Magic, you could actually be playing against an actual person. You
Right.
can't play even if you're sitting face to face against your opponent on your smartphone playing, like that still isn't going to be the same feeling as like having paper cards and touching your cards and oh, I don't know what this one
Yeah.
does, let me look at it, and actually sitting and talking to a real person while you're playing the
No,
game. That's
it's to the
what makes
point where
Magic better than those games. That's the only thing that makes Magic better than those games.
when I'm playing Arena, I'm dragging my cards in my hand from left to right, just like I do when I'm holding a paper hand of cards. And, just because the paper Magic is so ingrained in, I've played so many more games of paper than I ever will digital. And most of my opponents are not like that when I'm playing. So
Yeah,
they're all,
and that's really interesting. Like especially after the pandemic, you're seeing people who like got into Magic online and haven't played a game of paper Magic against a real person before.
mm-hmm.
And to me that's just like crazy to think that we went from uh, you know that's the default way to play is like face to face in person, and like it wasn't even possible to play on a computer. And then we're up to the point now where it's people who like literally they've never played a paper game, and they maybe they don't even own an actual physical Magic card.
Yeah, it's when I go on forums for Arena and I see people complain about their opponent conceding, I'm like, have you played in a paper Magic tournament before? Because that happens a lot. Once your opponent thinks he can't win, he concedes. He doesn't keep playing for your enjoyment.
Yeah, yeah. That's
And the computer players they can't wrap their head around that, why people keep quitting. And I understand a lot of times they're frustrated because they're trying to complete their daily quests and they need to play 2 more green spells and then their opponent quits and they got to start a whole new game. And I think that has a lot to do with why people get upset too, is they just want to complete their quests and log off, and
that's the grind.
Yeah, it's so different from paper where, like, for me, my time playing Magic, I would go to the store to play Magic, and sometimes I'd be there for 5 hours and never play a game of Magic.
Yeah.
And so the people obviously, we'd be watching people play Magic or test decks against each other or trying to figure out sideboarding for certain matchups and stuff like that all the time. But we got better by watching each other play, and you don't see that. People watch streamers and stuff like that, but it's not the same as sitting right there with someone and going through it. And it's just so different. You'll get a streamer who will be getting so many different, like a lot of them good suggestions from chat on changes to make to their deck or what they should be doing as their line. But there's just so much information coming at them that they can't process it in time.
Yeah.
But when you're sitting with friends and doing that, you can be like, no, stop. And there's no hourglass timer. There's no reason why you need to continue playing the game. Even you can just have the discussion on why this was the correct move and go that route. And I think too, once I became a judge, having those times like that where we went through all these interactions on cards and why this is a better thing, I ended up going through so many scenarios that I have come up on in judge conferences where they're trying to quiz you on what's the right thing. I'm like, oh yeah, no, this is the way it works. And just because of a specific time when I was testing decks and we had that interaction come up. And then you also, as a judge, get to see some interesting interactions at tournaments that will then improve you as a player.
Yeah, for sure. Especially because a lot of the time, if something interesting comes up in a tournament and other people know that you're a judge, your player friends will be like, hey, I saw this really cool thing happen. And then they'll like describe it to you, and then you'd be able to you get access to lots and lots of interactions that way. So it's very much the case that the social aspect of the game helps make you a better player, even if you're not actively focused on the game as much. You're
right.
Still getting more information that way, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's amazing how much information that someone who's been playing or judging for a long time, you just hit a point where you just know this is how it works. You don't have to go into the reason, because of layers or whatever. You're like, nope, this is how it works. And it's harder to explain to the player why that's how it works. You're 100% correct, because you've seen that's how the interaction works so many times. But then, once you start having to break down the reasons why it works that way, it sometimes gets more difficult. And I've seen a lot of floor judges at Grand Prix level have players call for the head judge because the judge is like trying to tell them, no, you're wrong, but I'm trying to remember exactly why you're wrong.
Yeah, it's that's a very important thing. I think a lot of people, and especially a lot of judges, are guilty of this at times. is they're not interested in knowing why stuff works. They just want to know how it works.
Hmm.
And if you know how it works, that's sufficient, I guess, some of the time. But if you don't have the explanation down,
Right.
you're not really even if you got the answer right, you didn't get the you didn't get it right.
Hmm.
The explanation is part of the answer, and if you can't explain why something is the way it is in a way that's convincing to a player who doesn't know, then you actually don't know the answer to that question.
No, and especially when you're at a GP level where you may be speaking to a Portuguese speaker and trying to explain to them in a language you don't understand why this works, and all you can say is I don't know. You know, it's very interesting watching. I have not judged a GP, but watching judges as a player at GPs throughout the years take foreign language calls and try to be clear as to why the rulings are the way they are.
É muito difícil. That's um, even if you're fluent in a language, which I certainly was not fluent in any of the foreign language GPs that I went to. But even if you are fluent, it's an extra challenge on top of that because Magic has like these technical kind of words that you have to.
Yeah, the jargon.
Yeah, you're not gonna learn how to say like state based action in whatever
Yeah,
Rosetta Stone or whatever college
yeah,
classes that you were taking. So it
yeah.
does add
You
like an extra layer of difficulty on top of the fact that you're probably thinking in your normal language.
Yeah, no, the one situation that I remember specifically is my opponent was Brazilian and spoke Portuguese, and the the interaction at the time they called it white lightning. Do you know the spell waylay?
Yeah, yeah.
The
The
instant you
three
put three
knights.
two two night. Yep. Well, at one point you could cast it during your opponent's end step,
Oh yeah,
and then the tokens would still be there on your turn without summoning sickness
yeah.
because
Because that's how it worked.
yep. And it was a deck with a bunch of crusades in it and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah, I remember that.
I'd played that against my Brazilian opponent, who was just irate because he didn't understand why it's the end of the turn. That was what he could say in English was end of the turn because I heard that a lot. And I'm like, I don't need to know how to explain this, why this works. The judge needs to be able to tell you why it works, but it works. And the argument went on forever, and we had a time extension, and we're probably like one of the last 5 matches going in the round. And um, Willie Adel from Brazil ended up coming over and telling the judge the words to tell the guy to get him to calm down. And um, luckily there was a bilingual player there.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was so frustrating to me because we sat there. Basically, it would have been a lethal attack in game one, waiting forever and ever before my opponent would let the game go on.
Mm.
So it was really frustrating.
Yeah,
But
I remember I actually I went to GP Sao Paulo a few years ago, and
okay.
so I spoke some Portuguese, but like not super fluently. But I had like basically the same sort of situation come up. I had a player who didn't really speak a lot of English, and trying to take the judge call when like neither one of us can really like maybe we can like 30% understand what the other person is saying,
Right.
and we can maybe like 20% say what we want to say. Yeah, it is frustrating. But I at the same time experiences like that remind me of one of the biggest things that I really love about Magic, which is that you can play the same game as people literally all over the world.
Hmm.
You can literally go halfway around the world and still be playing the same game. Still have that kind of connection with other people. Uh, the community you have access to is, I think that's one of the coolest things about Magic personally.
Yeah, it's got just a little more reach in Europe and like even South America and Africa than the games like Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh do. Um, so it kind of has Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh, both being Asian-based properties, tend to have a much larger following than Magic does in those areas. But worldwide, it's not the same at all.
Yeah, I like the wherever I've been in the world, I've always been able to play Magic, and I think that's just
Mm-hmm.
amazing.
Yeah. I've got a friend who went over to Switzerland, and he's teaching over there, and I actually ran into I met him for we went to the Forgotten Realms pre-release together. It's
Mm.
the first time we had played cards together in like 10 years. He just messaged me. He's like, "Do you still play Magic at all?" I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, I'm going to be in your area. Do you want to go to a pre-release? It just happens to be when I'm in town." So it was kind of cool that, someone who I haven't seen forever, and I didn't even know him from playing Magic. We just knew that we both played Magic. So that was what we got to do as our hangout, just because
Yeah,
we could go in, and we both went in. He didn't know anyone at the store we went to, but I did, and he fit right in with everyone there because he's a nerd who plays Magic, and that's what they're all there to do too. So
yeah, you got that instant connection with all these people you never met before.
yep.
It's very cool. Well, hey, I don't want to take up all your night. I really appreciate getting to talk to you about how your experiences with Magic has been throughout your you know extremely long and almost as long as the game has
Yeah,
been around
it's
itself career.
my whole
Before
adult life pretty much.
Yeah, before we sign off, any awesome stories that you want to tell? We can't end the night without this amazing story that I have been thinking about all week.
I think the best story that I have from all my years of playing Magic was there was a PTQ in Winnipeg, and we had 5 guys from St. Cloud that were ready, and Jerry Thompson was 15 years old at the time and built my deck. The deck archetype was Miracle Grow, um, and it was very unknown. So we were excited. We took it up there. We got to the border, the Canadian border in North Dakota, and Border Patrol was like, "Hey, are any of you related to this 15-year-old kid who was with?" And
Oh,
we hadn't thought of that. This is pre 9/11, of course, so borders were still pretty lax. So we were ready to drive back. I think it was about a 6-hour drive already. And he's like, "Well, can we just call my mom?" So the Border Patrol let him call his mom at like 4 in the morning
oh
to go
man.
across the border um, up into Canada. And yeah, just thinking about stuff like that, how that would never fly today. And it was just, we never thought of it because we went to Milwaukee with Jerry, or, you know, all these PTQs, and we got to the border. And yeah, so we were able to take him into Winnipeg, and I believe he and I both finished in the top 4 of the Winnipeg, or of the PTQ. We both lost to the same person, but that was his first PTQ finals, um, which was pretty cool to have gone there and played the same deck that he had built, and then watch his career go from there.
Yeah, that is amazing. And I'm really glad you was able to get out of that one in one piece too, because yeah, that could have
Yeah,
been pretty sketchy.
yeah. I mean, the worst thing that would have happened is we would have had to drive home.
Well, that
So
would have been pretty bad too.
yeah, no, the guy who was driving was not very happy about this whole situation.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's funny, even the fact that if he would have had a note from his mom, it would have been okay.
Huh.
Which now still is like
Yes,
no.
that's still not gonna fly.
Yep, just different times.
Yep.
Just like Magic over the years,
Yeah,
so
it's
much
so
different. But
different. It's so much stuff is different, and I bet if we're having this conversation like 20 years in the future, we're gonna be saying the exact same thing.
yeah, yeah. I've thought when I sold my cards before, I thought paper Magic was dead, and I was entirely wrong then.
Yep.
So I expect it to make a full recovery from where it's at now. I don't know what that means as far as the tournament scene, but if the game just becomes Commander or EDH, it's still a great game.
Yeah. Yeah, and hey, there's only two certainties in life: death and taxes, and Magic cards are going to be worth twice as much every year. So
Yeah, I would say.
I've learned from the people who've gone before me. I'm never selling my dual lands.
Yeah,
They're
no,
probably gonna
I
have to bury them with me or something.
I don't sell anything anymore. Well, I shouldn't say that. I sell all my foils because I don't like to play with foils. For me, opening foils is something that I can sell that allows me to buy more non-foils.
There you go. Yeah, as a judge, I'm not a big fan of foils myself.
That's
There's
kind of
too much chances that some guy is going to tell you that you can't spend the card that you spent twice as much money as a normal card on.
yeah,
So
yeah,
not worth
especially with the
it.
quality now.
It's been a problem at least as long as I've been playing. But at least something. Oh, this one's a little bit bent. Now we can't play it anymore. Oh, it's really humid out. Oh, that's got to switch decks because we can't play these ones anymore.
Yep. All right. Well, if you do have any other questions, you can either hit me on Messenger or Discord. I would say Messenger would probably be the better bet because I don't know if my notifications are even on for Discord.
Yeah, sure thing. And
Um,
again, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
you too.